Hello, and welcome to the Banff at Altitude podcast, celebrating 50 years of adventure storytelling from the Banff Centre Mountain Film and Book Festival. Since its beginning in 1976, the Banff Centre Mountain Film and Book Festival has been a gathering place in celebration of all things mountain culture. The yearly festival, hosted at Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity, fosters an appreciation of the world's mountain places by creating opportunities for people to share and find inspiration in mountain experiences, ideas, and visions. Over the years, we've spoken to hundreds of incredible adventurers who share their spectacular and moving stories. My name is Joanna Croston, and I'm going to be digging through our festival archives to revive some of our favorite presentations from the past to get you stoked for what's to come in 2025, our 50th anniversary. And well, hopefully you'll be stoked for life in general. In continuing with this tradition of sharing stories and connections, we hope this podcast will inspire you to explore, preserve, and enjoy the great outdoors. On this episode of Banff at Altitude, we're digging into the hard alpine climbs of Steve Swenson. Steve is known for his kind and warm personality and advocates for mentorship systems in the outdoors. His climbing achievements are top-notch, and he is only one of a handful of people who have won the coveted Piolet door more than once. In 2012, Swenson, along with Richey and Freddie Wilkinson, made the first ascent of Saser Kangri. At the time, the peak was the second highest unclimbed mountain in the world. This was Swenson's first win at the Piolets. In 2019, Swenson, along with Graham Zimmerman, Richey, and Chris Wright, climbed Link Sar, a first ascent which awarded them the 2020 Piolet Door Prize. His book, entitled Karakoram, Climbing Through the Kashmir Conflict, is a fantastic read, and I would highly recommend buying it at your local bookstore. From our 2021 festival, here's Steve Swenson, interviewed by climber Geoff Powter.
Thanks so much, everybody, for being here. It's a thrill for me, and I'm hoping a thrill for Steve to be here as well. I just want to spend a little bit of time telling you a little bit more about this fellow sitting up on stage with me. I've had the privilege of 23 years now of interviews here, either on this stage or some of the other stage at the festival, interviewing just really exceptional outdoor athletes and writers and thinkers. And one of the things that's really come to me is, as much as I've appreciated those adventurers that are really well known and have really made a name for themselves and have really publicized the things that they've done, in the years that I've been doing these interviews, I've really found that the people that have really caught my attention are those people who've been a little bit quieter, because they often have actually more to say. And I think that's especially true of the person sitting up here beside me on stage. He probably is a little bit reluctant to talk about his own achievements, so I thought I'd do that for him a little bit. If you can imagine the length of time that this fellow has been climbing. This is 53 years now of climbing that he's been going through. He began in the home range of the Olympics and the Cascades. He came up here, as all good Americans should do at some point. He made the second ascent of the north face of Alberta. He made the third ascent of the north face of Robson, turned his attention to Yosemite, where very early on he made ascents of A5 nail-ups and El Cap, including Space and Lost in America. He climbed the north face of the Eiger in Europe, as well as the Walker Spur. And then Steve turned his attention to the big peaks. Beginning in 1980, he led or participated in 4 expeditions to the Gasherbrum 4, coming very close to the summit of that peak. He made the first ascent of the Mazzino Ridge to Mazzino Gap on Nanga Parbat, an absolutely enormous climb that I think has 13 peaks over 7,000 meters on the way to the main summit of Nanga Parbat. He made the second U.S. ascent of K2 via the North Face without oxygen, and then also made a solo ascent of the North Ridge of Everest, also without oxygen. And this wasn't just a traditional dirtbag story. Steve, in the time that he was doing all of that stuff, was also running a business as an engineer and was raising 2 young boys. When Steve turned 50, he, as he likes to put it, reinvented himself. He asked himself what kinds of climbs did he want to be doing now, what kind of style did he want to be doing those climbs in, and his answer was smaller, harder peaks with smaller, harder teams. He climbed in the Alaska Range. He did several things here in the Rockies. He went to Patagonia. He climbed Cerro Torre. He climbed in Central Asia. But as you heard in the film, he is perhaps the master beyond all masters of the Karakoram range in terms of his knowledge of the range and the number of times that he's been there. And by my calculations, something around 20 expeditions to the Karakoram in the past 25 years. He's made many outstanding first ascents of technically severe 6,000 and 7,000 meter peaks, which are really the sweet spot of that incredible range. He climbed on 3 of the Latok Towers, including making the first alpine-style ascent of Latok 2. He climbed Changi Tower, he attempted K7 West, he climbed a new route on Choktoy Tower as well. He made 2 trips to the 7,500-meter Saser Kangri 2 in the Indian Karakoram. The second of those trips was the recipient of the 2012 Piolet d'Or Award. And he hasn't just been climbing in the Karakoram. His 2017 book, Karakoram, was shortlisted for the Banff Mountain Book Award that year. It's really a masterful account of climbing in that range. It's a beautiful telling of his own personal story. And what really leapt out at me around that book is that it's a very, very beautiful portrait of the people and the land that those people live in. Beginning in 2001, Steve began a 17-year commitment to making the first ascent of the 7,000-meter peak. His eventual ascent of the southeast face of Link Sar that you just saw in the film won the 2020 Piolet d'Or Award, the second time that Steve has received that award. And just to be clear, he made that climb that you just saw in the film at the age of 65. That is not the climb of a typical 65-year-old. Steve's also made exceptional contributions to the climbing community, particularly down in the U.S., where he served as the president of the American Alpine Club and also served as a board member of the Alex Lowe Foundation. This up here beside me is truly a remarkable man who deserves to be as well known as any climber I've ever sat with. I want you to meet Steve Swenson. So to that latter point, Stephen, I'm curious, why did you decide to accept this invitation to come and be interviewed here today?
Well, Geoff, everyone told me that if I came here and was interviewed by you, that I would be rich and famous.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah.
We'll pass a hat around later.
I'm expecting a call from the Today Show tomorrow. But seriously, I mean, I retired about 10 years ago, had an opportunity with our business. We sold it, and I decided to retire. And I wanted to just kind of use that part of my brain a little bit more around storytelling. And I think that my stories were a little bit different because, I do have a little bit of a different perspective, given that, I've had, a 35-year career as a water resources engineering consultant, and then, my family has been and is a huge part of my life, so people enjoyed the stories and kind of the perspective, and so it's been kind of fun, just kind of talking to folks and getting out there and doing that.
Well, I get the sense reading the book and certainly in some of the conversations that you and I have had over the years that you're also taking this opportunity to make some sense of the things that you were doing before, because I've always had the sense you've been a pretty busy guy too. So to actually pause and think, what is all this?
For sure. When I was trying to juggle a really active climbing career with my family and my career, it was almost like leading 2 separate lives, that had different chronologies that were sort of parallel but separate. I would come back, from these trips and, my inbox was up to here, and kids had soccer games and homework and all the, usual family things. And I just put those journals on the shelf and kind of forgot about it. And they just were sitting there, and I was looking at them and had this opportunity to kind of simplify things a little bit and retire earlier in life. And I really wanted kind of to poke around at that a little bit because I really had never had time to think about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is certainly a topic, and if any folks in the audience watched the film Torn last night about the life of Alex Lowe and his family, it's very interesting, this idea of how you find balance between those 2 parts of things. And I love the wording you just used there. It's more of a juggling act than it is really finding balance. Is that the way that it felt?
Yeah, it's like you've got all these balls in the air, and they're all really important, and you can't drop any of them. Fortunately, I had a very understanding family and colleagues and who were, patient with me for times that I was gone because, out of all those things, sometimes I felt like the best I could do was a good job with two of them at once. At least one of them was sort of getting neglected. But they would be patient because they knew I would come back and give it the attention that it needed and it deserved. But there was no balance there. It was complete chaos.
And I'm curious, is it kind of a shifting gears for you too, where when you're in the mountains, home is simply put away on the shelf, and then, as you said, when you're at home, the mountains get put away on the shelf. How does that land for you?
Well, I think, going into the mountains, I'm thinking about my family, all of the time, but the one thing that was nice about it is I only really had to do one thing, especially back then. In the early trips, this was before satellite phones and things like that. We were completely cut off. We had mail runners that would be the only way you could get information from the outside. So it really allowed me to kind of have my focus entirely on kind of what we were doing, and as it should be. It needed to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you actually wrote that it was wonderful and safer to focus solely on climbing. To forget about that other side, because would that change your decisions if you were thinking about your family at home?
It's funny because my wife, Ann, with all the communication now, she was sort of like, because a similar thing would happen for her. I'd go away and she'd run the house herself, and it's sort of like I would come back and it'd be like, I'd have to take some time to reintegrate myself back into my family. I couldn't walk in, the first day and start telling my kids what to do, because it'd be like, who are you? You haven't been here. But she said she liked it better when we didn't have the sat phones, because she'd kind of do her thing and I would come back. And whereas now I think it's harder, for some of the younger guys I go with, because some of them are calling, their significant others, every day. And Ann will be sort of like, once a week is fine.
And so I'm curious, when you see some of the differences in the partnerships that you have these days and you see things like that happen, does it concern you? Do you feel like you want to kind of step in and offer some wisdom about don't call so often and be a little bit more separate?
It's just different. I just think communication and the accessibility of communication and people's expectations around it is just, it's a generational thing. It's just completely different. I think it's fine. Mm-hmm. I think the kinds of people young people I've been fortunate enough and so grateful to be with on trips like Link Sar, like the film that everyone just saw, they're committed to these projects. And to them, it's sort of like having those daily conversations on the sat phone is kind of normal for them. And for me, it's still kind of like, oh my God, this thing can talk halfway around the world and it's like magic, and not for them.
Sorry, you actually sound older than 60 when you just said that. Can we talk? I'm curious about the flow of partnership and how it's kind of slipped into mentorship for you as well. I think it's quite interesting, the role that you've been playing. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how you've come to that place, whether it's an active decision you want to be climbing with the younger folks. Is that because they're the only people who are doing the things that you want to do? Tell us a bit about that.
And then that answer to that is yes. As you get to be an older climber, most of the people that you do it with, there's different reasons that they don't keep doing. You have to keep finding younger partners. Mm-hmm. And I've been through a couple of other, I would consider, generations of climbers younger than me for climbing in the Great Ranges. And I think that it's a mutually beneficial, these multi-generational trips, because I have a tremendous amount of experience on big mountains, mm-hmm. and they don't. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong that I know about because I've made those mistakes before. And the young guys know that, so they know that I can kind of head us away from some of those potential problems. But they really bring a tremendous amount of athleticism and different perspectives mm-hmm. around speed and that I don't have. And so it's really been kind of a wonderful combination, last few times, on trips to these big objectives. I think mentoring in general, you have to be careful. I'm really conscious of not wanting to come across as some older guy say, "No, I told you so," no. And it's really easy to come across as sort of the grumpy and the telling. Mm-hmm. And really to be a credible mentor, you have to have some skin in the game yourself and really kind of be in there, with folks and listen to them and what their issues and concerns are, and I can kind of relay to them what I know and what I've learned, and I probably know a little bit more than they do about a lot of these things because I'm usually at least twice as old as they are. And I think they appreciate that. And I just try not to be too heavy-handed about it. I try to, because I learn from them and they learn from me.
Right. Well, and I'm also interested that the way that you've chosen to do that is more in one-on-one relationships rather than, writing opinion pieces in climbing magazines or, writing a blog where you can, pass the messages on. You're really doing it hands-on, one-on-one.
I think that's the best way that it works, I mean, most people don't take things too seriously if you just tell them. I mean, most of the time, even if it's not about climbing or something else, I try to ask questions, like, well, how did that work for you, or how would you do that next time, or, and let them answer those questions themselves, because it's really that kind of self-realization that gets people going and really thinking about doing things differently rather than somebody just telling them. Those kinds of broad brush, opinion pieces or writing about what I think, no one would listen, and it would be sort of making a brand for myself as being the grouchy old guy that's trying to, preach to everybody about how they should do things, and I don't have those kinds of answers.
Well, and I think, the beautiful outcome of it has been that now someone like Graham or Chris actually goes out there to the world with your message of a different way of approaching the mountains, and certainly a different way of making decisions. So I wonder if we can talk about that. Can we talk about the process of decision making for you?
Boy, we could talk the whole time about decision making, and I think I learned a lot about decision making just in my professional career too. And what I've learned there is, first of all, like good decisions don't get made quickly. Like when we were on Link Sar, sometimes we'd make a decision, a really big, complicated, dangerous mountain that we would go round and round on strategy and route where the route should go and timing and all of that. And sometimes we'd make a decision in the evening and we'd get up in the morning and one of our expedition members would say, I didn't sleep very well last night. That just didn't feel good. There's something wrong. I don't think we've got the right answer here yet. And we would just dig it all up again. And more times than not, we would come up with a different idea. I think decision making is the more diverse set of opinions that you have going into a decision-making process, you're going to come up with a better outcome if you open yourself up to that. And I think that humility, especially in things like big mountains like this, we're not in charge. We're trying to eke our way through this, little line of, a big mountain and try to get in there and get out of there and get out of harm's way, and so you have to approach it with a lot of humility. And I think maybe most important of all, you really, I think, have to examine, what your goals and objectives are to begin with. If you've got some axe to grind, or some predetermined, I got to climb this peak, hell or by high water or something like that, and you're not willing to fail, you're not willing to look at it as a learning process, and maybe you'll get to the top. That again, I think is something that can be really dangerous.
And you've been pretty open about the value of failure and the willingness to go back multiple times. I gave some parts of the list of the things that you've been on several times. How do you approach failure, and how has it helped you?
Well, goals are really important. I mean, I've had hundreds and hundreds of goals, but what I've learned about goals is that really they're not that important in and of themselves. Like for example, the film that everyone just saw, after we climbed Link Sar, actually getting to the summit of Link Sar was not as important to me as how we worked together to climb that mountain. That was way more important to me when we were done than the fact we actually got to the top. So success or failure, is really an outcome of all these other things you learn along the way, and that's more important. It's more important than saying I stood on the top of, A, B, C, or D.
And I kind of hear you saying that you don't even think of the things that you didn't get to the top of as failures.
No, because really I think, to me, I feel like that these goals are simply the inspiration that we all have. It's real important to have goals because really the goals should be an inspiration for you to do the kinds of things that you want to do to achieve that goal. And that motivation you have then to do that thing is the most important thing, much more important than the thing itself, if that made sense.
In any sense, do you feel like your willingness to not get up things or to slow down the decision making is the reason why you're still here today compared to lots of peers that simply aren't? And I mean both that they've either died or they've stopped climbing.
I think that you really have to examine, all your motives. I think it was one of the British climbers, I can't remember who, it said, we go to the mountains, first of all, to come back safely, to come back friends, and then to get to the top, and in that order. So if we take that to heart, all of this work that we put into training, into decision making, and every mountain, has its own quirks. And a lot of times you could have tons of experience, on other peaks, even comparable peaks, but, to unravel the mysteries of a mountain like Link Sar, for example, took several times. And we could have probably raced up and tried to do it more quickly or to not think about all the things that we did, but it would have made it a lot more dangerous. So I think having a kind of a methodical approach to thinking about these things and trying, no one can tell you that this is safe, but I think that kind of an approach really minimizes the risk. And certainly with a lot of things that I've done, that I can think of mistakes that I've made and close calls that I've had, that I was lucky. But I've worked hard to try to think really hard about these things and be as careful as we can.
You think there's a tension between the attitude, and I'm thinking particularly of some pretty strong climbers who talk about fast and light and, really reducing the odds against getting up the mountain versus the way that you approach things? Are you not a fan of fast and light?
Boy, the level of athleticism that some of these folks have, for moving as quickly as they can is pretty impressive and amazing. But people should do that, with their eyes wide open. The added risks that people take in trying to go as fast as they do are significant. I remember back in the mid-'80s, I was with Todd Bibbler, and we climbed the 38 route of the north face of the Eiger, and we get back, and we meet some other local climbers, and we bivvied on it a couple of times. And they said, "Oh, you did that, how fast?" And we said, "Oh," and they go, "Oh, it's very slow." And the reason why is because the one evening before, we went and just bivvied on this ledge, and then the next day we climbed most of the face before the sun came onto it. And then when it did and rockfall started, we just stopped at 1 in the afternoon. And then the next day, went up the exit cracks, got to the top at 9 or 10 in the morning and came down. And so the way we timed it was so that we wouldn't be on parts of the mountain during times of the day when there was rockfall.
Of course.
And of course we were slower, but it was a lot safer. If you tried to do it really fast, and maybe some people are so fast they could get all the way through the exit cracks before the sun came around and they wouldn't have rockfall. But then a lot of people, they would just try to do it quickly and go up through there when the rocks are coming down, and then it's just kind of Russian roulette. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that.
And are you enough of a mountain romantic that you like the idea of kind of staying up there anyways? The more bivvies, the better, and you're in that place. Why not stay and enjoy?
I like that, but I don't know that that's why. I'm usually kind of thinking about what's the right timing to be in the right place at the right time, so that, like Link Sar, we spend 9 or 10 days on Link Sar, and it's not from our advanced base camp to the summit. It's not that far, really. It's big, but not to take that many days. It was mostly because some days we would only climb for 4 or 5 hours or through the night or something like that. And then when the sun came up, we'd have to stop. It was too hot or it's too dangerous. So I don't know that I'm a big romantic about it. I enjoy it, but I think most of those decisions are pragmatic ones.
You mentioned having goals before and having objectives. I'm curious for you, what constitutes a perfect mountain? What are you looking for?
A perfect mountain? Well, to me, an unclimbed, these mountains like Link Sar or Saser Kangri 2, higher mountains in the world that still haven't been climbed. There's a lot of attraction there for that because I think for me, I like that kind of adventure, to figure it out. When we were on Saser Kangri too in the eastern Karakoram in 2009 and 2011. I mean, we were literally in places that we didn't know of any recorded history of anybody ever actually being on those glaciers before. I kind of like that. I like technical climbing. I like pointy peaks that have some steep climbing on them. And I like mountains that aren't so heavily laden with snow that it's just almost impossible to try to climb them without being in the midst of just really unacceptable to me, avalanche hazards. So it's one of the reasons I like the Karakoram.
One of the things that we can see the image on the screen now, and I believe that's Link Sar, right? That they're complicated mountains too. Like it's not a single ridge line that you're following all the way to the summit. In that particular case, there was a lot of travel, a lot of redirection of the route, a lot of finding keyhole solutions to complicated problems. Is that exciting for you too?
Yeah, I mean, it can vary. Like on Saser Kangri too, is just a line straight up the face pretty much, and that was cool. Link Sar was extremely complicated mountain, and took us a long time to figure it out. In our 2017 attempt, it took us a couple of months just to figure the route up to 6,000 meters. And one of the key passageways we discovered after a bunch of dead ends is we followed a herd of ibex over a little pass down onto a glacier around, because I said, they're going to those meadows on the other side of the glacier. They must know that there's a way to get across there, and that might be the key passageway for us. And sure enough, we followed them and we went over there, and it made a big end run around a bunch of obstacles in front of us that we'd been struggling with, and really kind of put the whole thing together.
The other part of the perfect equation, in addition to the perfect mountain, is the perfect partner. Tell me a little bit about what constitutes a good partner for you.
Well, now we're going to have to talk about love. Can we do that?
We can do that. Things have changed. We can do
good.
That now.
All right.
Yeah. Open up, Steve.
Okay. When I was driving up to Canmore this last week, I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, and this guy, had written a book, and that was kind of about the divisions that we have in our world right now, and that we need to kind of come together around love and what that is. And he was talking about how it's a verb. It's the willingness to will good on others as others. And it's not a feeling. It's really goodwill, and that kind of caring that we have for each other as human beings. And this isn't just partnerships, in the mountain. These are any kind of partnerships. And those people in your life that really care about you, they care about you as much as they care about themselves. They might care about you more than they care about themselves. Those are the perfect partners. And I know that all these guys I was on Link Sar with, that's how we felt about each other. And it's funny because, the younger guys are much more open about this with each other than certainly people from our generation, especially guys. And
so they will tell you?
They'll tell you.
How they're feeling?
Yeah, or they write you emails and tell you that they love you. And that's kind of new for me, with these younger guys. And I remember climbing early on with Graham somewhere, and I was on a belay station or something, and I'm belaying him up, and he climbs up to me, and he looks at me, and he goes, "Steve, did I tell you how much I appreciate you?" And I'm like, whoa. I mean, it's just, it's a little bit of a different world, but.
Better and truer, do you think? That those kinds of things are being said, and it's clear and open that that's truly how you're feeling about one another on the mountain?
Yeah. And then I actually see the old guys are kind of coming around too, they'll be that with each other, it's like probably early on I probably wouldn't say those things like to Mark Richey, but now we would. And those are the people that I want to go on trips with. Those experiences that you have, what you learn along the way, it's really kind of having that love for each other and being able to show that and live it and have that be your priority. And it's a big part of why we're able to do some of the things that we do, because that kind of commitment to each other does translate into success.
One of the sweeter things from the movie and an interview that I heard you do with the other guys as well was the idea for yourself of kind of recognizing that, okay, you may be done with the younger guys, those two younger guys for now, because they're going to go off and do some things that you perhaps don't want to do, but you're willing to set them free, if you will, from the mentorship relationship. So what comes next? How do you manifest the next 10 years for yourself?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I have the answer to it yet. I'll be 68 this winter, and these projects like a Link Sar, they oftentimes, are 3 to 5 year projects, and then I'd be into my 70s, and I don't want to put myself in the position of committing to something that then I can't follow through on.
Mm-hmm. Or compromise other people.
Or compromise other people. And so I think I would like to try to find, I love going to the Karakoram. I'd like to keep doing that. But I'd like to find some smaller objectives that I think would be challenging for me at my age, that would be interesting, and kind of get a little list of a few things to do over the next 5 or 10 years that I think I can still do.
Mm-hmm. In an interview with Adventure Journal, you told them you thought Link Sar might be your swan song, and I'm kind of interested what you meant by that. The last big hard thing you're going to do? Tell us more.
Well, maybe
about
the last big kind of Piolet door level kind of climb, I think,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't count that out, though, entirely. So we have just a couple of minutes left, and I'm curious if you can talk about the aging process for yourself. One of the things that I know marks you compared to lots of other, not just climbers your age, but climbers anywhere near your age, is I think you climb more and train harder than just about anybody else that I know. Are you still completely into it? Are you still in the thrall of climbing, or has it shifted for you somehow?
I still love climbing. Yesterday I was with my friends Matthias and Tanya, and we went up to try to climb the Nemesis, but the ice wasn't right yet. It's still too early in the season, but I was excited about it. Mm-hmm. I feel very grateful. I've been able to do a lot of the things that I really just dreamed about, like when I was a kid, and I just have a lot of gratitude for that, and for all the people I've been able to do it with, and I'm still really pretty healthy. I'm very grateful for that as well, and I'm pretty motivated to kind of just keep working to stay fit, to do the things I really love to do as long as I can. I was fortunate as a teenager, I was coached in an endurance sport, and so I learned about how to train, from as being a teenager, at a time when climbers back then didn't train at all.
Mm-hmm. As a matter of pride, even.
Yeah, right, yeah. And I think that's helped me a lot. So, I'm still pretty excited about it. I love the mountains. I love being able to experience the majesty of mountains in such a big, close-up way like that.
Mm-hmm. This might be an unfair question, and maybe you might be the last person who can actually answer this, but are you aware of how exceptional you are in terms of that? In terms of the physicality, in terms of the willingness, in terms of the continuing motivation compared to other people? Like you've seen other people drop off the map.
I try not to think about it too much because, I don't know, it just doesn't seem that important. What's more important to me is just being able to be out there and have fun, with people doing it for as long as I can. And if I've been fortunate enough to be able to stay healthy and do the work, and so that I can still do as much as I can do, then the way I feel about that is just like what I said before, is just gratitude. Wow, I literally will get up in the day and I just think about what I'm going to do that day or whatever, and I just pinch myself. I get to do this again, And on Link Sar, I was very conscious of the fact that, this might be my last time on a really big, over 7,000 meter first ascent I don't know, but probably,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to enjoy every moment, and I felt like I was really able to take it in, in a way that was pretty cool.
And I'm hearing, rather than that being a nostalgia or a regret for you, that's actually something you just entered right into and celebrated.
Yeah, because it's not the end, of things, it's just moving on to maybe something else, and then just being, we have a hard time being in the moment, and that was such a beautiful place, really could be quite moving, to be in the moment there.
You're starting to sound awfully romantic about it. And this is perhaps a bridge to the wonderful film that everybody's going to get to see after we're done, but I do wonder, in part of the journey you've been through as a climber, have there been times where you have thought, I just don't want to be doing this anymore, like the magnitude of the risk is way too high and it's just something that I shouldn't be doing?
It happens to me occasionally that, I go through my contacts or even an older address book or things like that, and you just go through the names and it's like, oh, this person's not here anymore, this person, And it's kind of moments like that I realize how many friends I've lost. And, there was a time in my life when the way that I would cope with that would be like, oh, well, they made a mistake. I wouldn't do that. And in our culture, I think this is really hard because we've sort of been educated to always have an answer for everything. It's like, why did that happen? And the plus side of that is, we have the curiosity to develop all kinds of wonderful things. But the downside of it is that the thing that I came to eventually that finally made sense to me was that we all make mistakes. Anything that's happened to any of my friends could have happened to me. Mm-hmm. When I think about other things we could have done together, and it makes me sad. But what I've come to realize is that I've put some time and energy into really believing that there's things in this life that we'll never understand. Mm-hmm. And that sounds really simple, but it's really hard to do because we keep getting pulled back into wanting to think that we know all this stuff that we don't know. Mm-hmm. And if you really give yourself over to that completely, we don't know why a baby would get cancer. We don't know why this happened to my friend. We don't know what's going to happen to us eventually. And it's okay. Mm-hmm. It's okay.
Well, and I can't help but think that not only is it okay, but it actually makes it worth it. Like that's trying to understand that lack of understanding is what makes this beautiful.
Yeah, but I think that if you try too hard to make sense of it, you just torture yourself. Mm-hmm. You do. And I've seen it. I've seen people that are like, they just go round and round and round on trying to come up with an answer for a question that can't be answered. And it's just like, no, you could just stop. You could be at peace. We don't have to have an answer to everything. Mm-hmm. And that can set you free.
And with that, you see how the quiet ones have wonderful things to say. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks so much for listening. Make sure to pick up a copy of Steve Swenson's book, Karakoram, Climbing Through the Kashmir Conflict, at your local bookstore. Join the festivities and help us celebrate 50 years of adventure stories at the heart of the festival here in Banff. Check out our website at banffmountainfestival.ca. This episode was produced by Anik C and is a production of Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity. The theme music was composed by Jacques Blackstone. A special thanks to our audio engineer Ben Ewing and the production team at Banff Centre, as well as the folks from the Paul D. Fleck Library.